Let me put it this way. What I call post-activism is this invitation to be troubled by displacement. It's first a noticing that agency, we don't have agency per se. Agency is a feature of ecology, right? We are secreted by the technologies we use. We're entangled with worlds around us. We're not isolated individuals acting upon the world, is what I'm trying to say, right? A very pressing and consistent myth in modern civilization is that here you are, here's the world, fix it, right? So it's like it's like agency inhabits the individual, the isolated individual. But there is a sense in which, and this is not just from indigenous insights, Yoruba cosmologies, Indian and myth and beautiful cosmologies and the pantheon, feminist new materialisms, post-humanisms, it seems that there is a groundswell of observation that no, we're not as human as we think we are. We are entangled with and imbricated within environments so that there's no acting that is not an acting with, right? There's no doing that there is not a doing with. We act like the technologies that we use. We don't just use Facebook, Facebook uses us, right? So there isn't any distance between us and the world. If you have that in mind, then you might come to understand why we often get stuck in our responses. Why a certain municipality in Denmark in November 2021 spent $150,000 clearing the beaches and its shores of seaweed and plastic and debris, only to take all this rubbish and dumping it back into the water and then repeating the cycle all over again, right? You come to ask, why do we do the same things over and over again? And so a fundamental tenet of what I call post-activism is the question, what if the ways we respond to the crisis are the crisis? What if the way we approach the crisis is the crisis, right? So the post-activism emerges at that place where we come to recognize that we are part of the world as if for the first time, right? It's like a crack in the patterns that frame us. And suddenly we look around us and we understand, okay, that's why we're doing this over and over again, right? So post-activism is a redistribution of agency. It's an invitation for us to notice that we are not the only ones in the room. And sometimes the appropriate thing to do is not the right thing to do, right? Or the right thing to do is not the appropriate thing to do. A very, very powerful example might be, I often consider myself an amateur ethnologist or anthropologist. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm recovering from that training, but I often consider myself an anthropologist of some kind. I travel to the West. I do that all the time. I'm on my way to Norfolk in a couple of weeks. Anytime I'm in the United States or in Europe and I'm in the airport or someplace, I often see my dear brothers and sisters in the West, religiously taking their trash, maybe a cup of coffee, Starbucks or stuff, plastic straws, and in carefully designated bins, dumping their stuff away, right? Food goes here, I'm smiling. Food goes here, plastic goes here, stuff goes here. It's very, very intriguing to me because I don't come from a culture that has these rituals. And the reason we don't have it is because, well, I'll get to that point. I don't want to spoil the ending for you. It turns out that over 93% of so-called recyclable materials is transported to Vietnam, to Indonesia, shipped to Ghana, shipped to the Gambia, shipped to Nigeria. I grew up in spaces that had the dumped and discarded materials, some stuff that was supposed to be taken away to a green emerald city and, repurposed as shiny new products, right? That's the myth of a green economy. No, it came to my playground. I grew up knowing what the recycling symbol was before I knew what it meant, right? So it seems that even the right thing to do, like throwing away your bins, or throwing away your waste in carefully designated refuse bins, seems to be part of what you might call a dopaminergic network from dopamine, the molecule that stimulates a sense of righteousness or a sense of pleasure that I'm doing the right thing, right? Think about how environmental activism is secreted by this molecule, and how, in fact, that activism is getting in the way of transformation. Because even when you tell people these facts and you tell them that, throwing it away is not actually helping. It's coming to me. It's coming to my playground. There's still a stuckness within those paradigms. There's still a frozen behavioral mode that keeps on repeating itself again and again. So I'm quite fascinated with breaks, with cracks, as Laureline might tell you. I'm fascinated with openings, how patterns change, and how bodies change along. I'm fascinated with changing subjectivities. I'm fascinated with how ecologies are also co-participating in this thing that we rudely call climate chaos. I'm fascinated with the monster at the edges of the city. You know, all those things with which we base our epistemologies of change upon, all those bodies that subsidize our activisms. I'm fascinated with that. So if you ask me what a post-activist response to climate change is, it's an invitation to look again, right? It starts from a place of disability, right? And by disability, I often call it generative incapacitation. It's that place, it's that crack, that space of displacement where we don't know what to do. That's so troubling that we want to close it up again. We want to get back to normal. In the ways we speak about getting back to normal after the pandemic, we want to close it up and get back to a sense of the familiar. My invitation, drawn from a long line of ancestral wisdoms, drawn from a long line of guerrilla activisms, drawn from a long line of deinstitutionalizing psychotherapy or schizoanalysis, is an invitation to stay with the trouble, because it's there we meet the monster, and it's there that something that exceeds us might meet us. There you go.
Whoa. Thank you so much, Bayo. Yeah, I was expecting that I would not really find my words after you speak, so I'm in it. And I'm very grateful for everything you said. The question I had, which is about, I guess, meeting the monsters, or being in the place where you're able to meet the monsters, which I understand also from what I know about your text and your courses as being related to this slowing down, which I find very interesting when we think about the urgency of climate action. Right. And so I would have a question about, is this what we're supposed to do when we slow down, meeting the monsters? How is the slowing down related to the emergency? I know it can be like a huge question, but is there something you can say about this relationship between slowing down, meeting the monster, and the emergency?
Meeting the monster, beautiful. I don't like speaking about climate change. just want to out myself. I'm so sorry. Nianta is angry with me. He's taking a bottle of Coke or something. He's pissed out. I don't really like to speak about climate change. And I'm with my brother, Dugald Hine, in this sentiment. And here's my reason why. There is some modern reductionistic sentiment that plays out when we speak about climate change, right? We reduce it to carbon emissions, reduce it to our anxieties and worries about the future. We reduce it to activisms based on green technologies, sequestering this, sequestering that. Climate change is how we name something that is impossible. It's like modern civilization is now at the feet of a giant sphinx, know the Sphinx, right? The Egyptian thing, right? We're now in the presence of a monstrous impossibility, an incalculable being or becoming so large that we can only know it in part. And our ritual, let me get biblical here. Let me go a little bit theological. In Acts chapter 17, I can't remember the verse. I was about to nail it and just drop the verse, but I cannot remember it. It's I grew up Christian. I no longer identify, but I'm still entangled with that faith. Paul is wandering through the city of Athens, and he's sad. He's angry somehow because he's seeing what he calls idols everywhere, right? Statues dedicated to gods that are not his own. And then he encounters a monument that has the inscription "to the unknown God," right? To the unknown God, or agnostos theos, right? To me, that's a crack in the Bible. It's a crack in the scriptures. It's an opening. Of course, Paul does not sit with the trouble. He immediately productivizes the crack and says, this unknown stuff, I know what it is, right? I know this unknown God. This unknown God is my God, right? And I'm going to impose him upon you and blah, blah, blah. I think, there's some theological quality about our discussions about climate chaos. It's like we have raised a monument, we decorate it with our climate sciences, we decorate it with our epistemologies, our particular ways of knowing. We have named this crack to an unknown God, right? There's something deeply powerful, what a particular people in Australia, native people in Australia would call birinyung, shimmering. There's a shimmering quality to this unknown God, right? That does not want to be reduced to climate science. It doesn't want to be reduced to the myth that modern civilization propagates. Now, I say this because I feel that we are at a crossroads of some kind. And the effort is to try to transcribe everything that we hope for, all the patterns of civilization, and to enforce some kind of continuity. We want to move on. We want to get back to normal. We want to reinforce and guarantee our permanence. But this thing we call climate change is transversal. It's asking something that our sciences cannot answer. It's bigger than our sciences. It's demanding something of us, right? That is not going to be answered by a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk with his phallic adventures into space. This is something deeper, something more transversal, something more disturbing than a simple solution, right? I think of this, let me just say some little things about how we know the world, because we know the world in terms of what the literature might call representationalism, right? Our attempt is to capture the world in images, to categorize it, to index it, to archive it. You need to have watched the documentary that was snippets of which were played on John Oliver's show recently about Native Americans and their histories, their artifacts being archived and indexed and put into boxes and put underground, and a procession of elders from those communities being led to those places, and they're told you cannot touch it. Just look at it. And this is how the world knows. This is how modern civilization knows the world in terms of a museum. We want to know the world in a final way, to categorize it. Now, here is the point that is very interesting to me, right? Climate change is that scandalous movement where the things that we have named and categorized and indexed move, right? It's like taking a picture of something and you put that picture, maybe a Polaroid picture, I think that works for my metaphor. You put it on your desk and you go to the kitchen and you come back and the image in the picture has moved. Shocking. There's nothing more scandalous to the image than something moving in the image, right? And that is what we are naming as climate change, that the world is promiscuous. It has its own imperatives. It is deeply intelligent. Human beings are not at the center of it, right? And this is I think this is what I mean by sitting with the monster, right? The monster is the site of displacement. The monster is the place where we don't know what to do. The monster is the place where we're met with things that exceed us. The monster is the ethnographic quality of the wound that has broken through our impervious confidence. The monster is an invitation to sit still and let the storm pass, right? But we want to get back to normal. So what do? We come up with solutions. We fly across the world. We pull on Obama, or we shake hands with a leader someplace. But that isn't working. We're still stuck in the logistics. It's like planting or installing solar panels on a slave ship, or doing breath work on a slave ship, or doing yoga on a slave ship. We're still on the damn slave ship. We're still in the clearing. The invitation is to lose our way, right? It's to dance with the wilds. Is to be met by a thing so large that we're broken through. And the sacred only shows up with breakages, with cracks. And I think that is what I mean by staying with the trouble and meeting the monster. It is veering away from the highway long enough to be met by the bushes on the side of the road.